Topiary is the practice of forming plants into various clearly defined shapes by trimming and clipping their foliage. Our project amends this practice and uses the land to obscure parts of our structure to create a new and interesting external view. Architecture exists as an ambiguous relationship between the part and the whole, where reality obscures preconceived expectations. Instead of perceiving the whole, we only see fragments that then raise questions about scale, perspective, and program. Through this project, we explore different scales of programming that reinforces the enormity of our structure, so that its true shape and size is left ambiguous when viewed through human perspective. Our manifesto is an exploration of the integration of architecture and nature at the scale of nature, and charts the human experience from urban landscapes to the natural world. We decided to treat our manifesto as a sequential set of images that told a story, rather than a set of separate images. For the creation of our manifesto, we drew inspiration from the ideology of metabolism, the Japanese architectural movement which utilizes biological processes as the basis for design ideas. This guided the transition between the urban and the natural within our illustration animation. The part-to-whole relationship that we discuss in our manifesto is influenced by Kiyonori Kikutake's conceptual project Marine City Megastructure, which deals heavily with the Japanese metabolist themes of growth, expansion, and partiality. Kikutake conceptualized the marine city to follow the processes of mitosis and biological growth. This diagram details the cellular growth of marine city, beginning with the smallest part, the pod, and ending with the whole, an entire unit of towers. This conceptualization on multiple scales speaks to the relationship of fragmentation that we adopted in our project.
The relationship of growth is also evident within nature itself. Nature, from the smallest scale like the cell, accumulates and propagates onto itself, taking on the qualities of a collective. It is no longer just an autonomy of parts. As we are immersed in the topography and landscape of Griffith Park, pieces or fragments of architecture reveal themselves to the viewer. Though we see indications before us, the architecture is largely obscured by the natural environments around it. The limitations of perspective guide our understanding of our environment, though we can begin to consider the implications of these constraints. What boundaries begin to be blurred, and how might that affect our supposed understanding as we zoom out into a broader view?
There are two ways one could explore fragmentation. The first is through a collective of many small structures, and the second is through a single structure that can only be experienced fragmentally, which is the route we've chosen to take. This map of Griffith Park illustrates areas of differing degrees of integration between humans and nature. Areas like the observatory, the Greek theater, and the stables are classified as exclusively for human use. Areas such as the golf courses and grassy picnic areas emphasize a sort of artificial nature, but are still primarily a space for humans. The hiking trails are a transitional space. They are artificially constructed and intended for human use, but they begin to delve into the nature of the park. The last classification is that of true nature, or wilderness, which makes up most of the park and is comprised of the mostly untouched and unaltered areas that humans rarely ever interact with. Instead of leveling or backfilling the land, processes that we found very destructive, we decided to integrate our structure with the terrain, allowing it to burrow underground in some places, represented in dark green, and remain suspended above little valleys by slender columns in other areas. This intersection with and suspension above the land created unique interactions with the existing pathways, some of which now snake beneath our structures or give access to the top of it. In a few locations, parts of the existing paths are completely obscured by our structure and are no longer traversable, and are represented in our diagram as the red path sections. The different programs in our structure further our ideas of fragmentation, combining notions of the individual and the collective, the small and large, and the private and public. The juxtaposition of these many programs and typologies results in a space where, as you move through plan and section, you also move through program. Our combined zoning diagram allows us to visualize the spatial overlapping of our various programs and to gain a better sense of our structure as a whole. By populating a plan of the second floor, we are able to further understand the scale and size of our project. The access points of our structure are arranged fragmentally due to the structure's integration with the landscape. As the boundary between land and building shifts, the opportunity for multiple entrances emerges, below the structure, above it, even within the columns. The entirety of our structure is about 4 million square feet, with 3 million square feet of occupiable space. The structure includes 250 apartment units of varying sizes and 12 transitional housing units for a maximum residential capacity of about 900 people. The total maximum capacity of our structure, including housing, is about 26,000 people. As a point of comparison, the Sana Rolex Learning Center, a project we've looked to for aesthetic guidance, is about 215,000 square feet and accommodates about 1,700 people.
Here we see a close-up plan of one of our social spaces and the ways in which they can be utilized. Activities range from leisurely strolls to bike rides and even yoga sessions. This plan highlights one of the several dining areas located within our structure that can be enjoyed by residents and non-residents.
There are two types of housing in our structure, the first of which is family apartment buildings. This plan is for an 800 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment. The second type of housing we have designed is transitional housing, intended for a stay of about 1 to 2 years. Each transitional housing unit is comprised of 6 dorm rooms and a shared kitchen and common space for a total area of nearly 2,000 square feet per housing unit.
Through this aerial perspective, we look at a whole that was once understood as a series of parts. From our own human perspective, it may very well still be a collection of pieces and corners existing autonomously from one another. They are never explicitly linked or understood as a total whole. When looking at these pieces, the facade no longer reveals what is happening on the larger scale or on the interior. The part and the whole become separate objects. What you see is not what you get. Our new manifesto image surveys the same fragments as before, but through a new familiarity offered by a reading of its totality. The once obscured hints of architecture are given new context. Deviating from the urban into nature, we now return back to the urban, or rather the simulated urbanscape, where scale and program still hold a sense of ambiguity, both looking from the outside and from within.